North America has two countries. There, I said it. I mean, how can 3 countries take up the whole continent? It is crazy. So in this video, we are going to fix that. Changing borders, adding countries, and making everybody upset in the process. Also adding Central America because I didn't think a full video made sense for them. A quick disclaimer, as usual, these changes aren't serious proposals. Don't take them too seriously, especially don't take a YouTube video too seriously. And let's address 2 things off the bat. Hawaii would be independent as its own country, and Greenland would not be involved because while it's close to North America, it is either going to be independent or remain Danish. No purchase nonsense here, just my own nonsense of redesigning the borders. Now, let's start in North America proper, up north. Canada is an interesting country. It holds heritage of Native American people, as well as British colonialism and French colonialism as well. The most obvious change that would initially jump to my head would be the creation of an independent Quebec. This is a recurring issue in Quebecois politics, and in 1995, a referendum only saw no to independence win by 50.6%. I wasn't aware that it was such a close call. So in this scenario, French Canadians would get their independence, finally flying their regional flag as a national one. And I'm afraid this would be the start of a large number of changes for Canada, and no, being the 51st state would definitely not be one of them. Because to start with, Quebec's independence brings about an issue. What would happen to Newfoundland and Labrador, which would now be disconnected from the rest of Canada? So, for the lack of a better choice, they could join Quebec in this new nation. If not, they could remain a separate independent country as well, although I'm not sure how much sense that would make. And we're still met with another challenge of 2 regions that would sort of become disconnected from the rest of Canada: New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, and Prince Edward Island. And here the cross-border changes begin, in this case with the United States. Because I think a breakaway state with an independent New England would be tremendously interesting. This is an area of the US that differs a lot from the rest of the country in culture, climate, even in politics. This area arguably makes up the states of Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Rhode Island. And if these were to join up with New Brunswick and Nova Scotia plus Prince Edward Island, we would have a sizable new country in North America, New England. Adopting this historical flag for the region, a red field with a white canton and a green tree. But since we just took away 2 or 3 considerable chunks of land of Canada, I think we need to make up for it by giving them a little bit of land. And so I would go ahead and annex Alaska into Canada. I just don't think it makes sense for countries to have enclaves or exclaves or whatever Alaska is to the contiguous United States territory. It would be one thing if it was an island, but it's just a disconnected territory with a whole country in between. So here it would now become a part of Canada. And I know what you are probably thinking. Oh my God, what are Alaskan people going to do now that they can't access their favorite shows on their streaming services because they would now get Canadian streaming services instead of American ones? Well, not to worry, because their problem would be solved with the sponsor of today's video, NordVPN. NordVPN is a great and long-lasting friend of the channel, and not only that, but they're also a fantastic VPN service. I really use it all the time, especially to access geo-restricted content. Sometimes when I'm looking up maps or just articles about specific things that I'm making videos on, I can't access them because I'm not in the US, and using NordVPN allows me to do so. Not only that, but their additional tools that you unlock depending on your plan choice add extra layers of service, like online security with their threat protection tool, a sort of embedded antivirus, or their dark web monitor tool that gives you alerts if your sensitive data is publicly exposed online. If you sign up using my link here in the description, you get 4 months for free and a big discount in a 2-year plan. So if you want to give the fastest VPN out there a try, I highly recommend trying NordVPN today. Now let's get back to the video. Next, and in similarity with New England, I think a new independent country should also be created, but instead of on the East Coast, it would be here in the West Coast. Also taking up parts of both Canada and the United States, an independent Republic of Cascadia would be created. Despite not having a huge support, the Cascadia movement envisions an independent bioregion encompassing the Pacific Northwest, including parts of Washington, Oregon, and British Columbia. The idea of an independent nation here has been around for a while. In fact, Thomas Jefferson, the third US president, expressed interest in the Pacific Northwest's potential for an independent republic. His vision of a self-sufficient Western territory aligns with some of Cascadia's ideals of regional sovereignty and self-determination. So here we would have another new country, one with a pretty cool flag too. I guess yet another similarity with New England would be that they also have a tree on their flag. And now that we are done with the changes involving Canada, let's move south to the United States. I won't get into internal state border redesigns, I'll leave that to another video. Here I just want to get into two things that I did with Canada: external border changes and potential breakaway countries. While the US has already lost significant land with the breakaway of New England and Cascadia, I think an additional one should take place: California. California was briefly independent upon its break away from Mexico. In fact, their state flag still reads Republic of California. In this scenario, and considering the cultural and political divisions that exist between the state and the rest of the country too, especially now that New England and Cascadia are out, I would remove California from the Union as well. A new Californian Republic would therefore be created, and to give it a boost as its own country, I would annex Mexican California to it, making it longer. California is already like the 5th strongest economy in the world, so even if they suffered a bit by going at it on their own, I'm pretty sure that in the long run they would succeed. In this scenario, the US would lose access to the Pacific Ocean entirely by having no coast there. They had already lost Hawaii in our hypothesis too, but in this case they would necessarily also lose all of their Pacific islands, domains, and territories like Guam, Samoa, etc., unless they were able to keep it by traveling to it through the Panama Canal, but it wouldn't be very convenient or make a lot of sense. And in this scenario, other US states could break free as well, or other unions of states. I mean, we could have independent Texas or a Great Lakes Republic. Also, hey, I just noticed the Great Lakes were missing from the map this whole time, so let me just add them here. There we go. Another change could be a new Deseret Republic, but then we're just going into full balkanization mode. While my changes are already bordering the impossible and completely unlikely, they at least have a slight chance of happening, and I think these other ones wouldn't. The only additional change I would make to the US would be the creation of a free Native American state. There's a lot of reservations in the US, and they're all spread around. Instead of making tiny sovereign islands, I would instead grant independence to Oklahoma, considering most of the state's territory is already under Native rule. Maybe without the Panhandle, since it makes no sense anymore. They would be landlocked, but so are many countries in the world, so why not? Before we move down to Mexico, I want to take a quick stop in the Caribbean islands because my solution here is pretty straightforward. I thought about doing minor changes, just like Puerto Rico being independent or uniting the Dominican Republic and Haiti into a single island nation, but then I saw a suggestion from someone on my Patreon. He suggested the local independence of all European-held territories in the Caribbean, like British Virgin Islands, Cayman, or St. Martin, and then an incorporation of all the Caribbean islands into a Caribbean Union, like the EU. So while national sovereignties would be kept, a common union would be created with freedom of movement, freedom of goods, and a single currency. The potential capital could be in Havana, for instance, considering Cuba would be the largest member, or they could do a full EU and pick a smaller country, as Europe did with Belgium, and choose, I don't know, Grenada to be the capital instead. By the way, if you want to have influence in the way that I write my videos too, you can join us on Patreon and do what this patron did. But now let's get back to the mainland with Mexico. They've already lost Baja California, but unfortunately for them, that wouldn't be the only lost territory in this scenario. It's important to note that the majority of independence movements within Mexico are either very small or non-existent, referring only to old historical movements, but I think it would still be interesting to see some new nations arise here. For instance, upon Spanish colonization, the Yucatan Peninsula was its own Spanish captaincy, created in 1617 to provide more autonomy for the region. After the Spanish were kicked out between 1841 and 1848, an independent Republic of Yucatan also existed, flying this pretty cool flag. Before the Spanish, this was also the region of the Mayan Empire, so having their own local history and subculture, I believe an independent Yucatan Republic would be interesting and would make some sense. The Zapatista movement has also demanded similar things in the adjacent region of Chiapas. Their goals are mostly autonomy and indigenous self-governance rather than outright independence, but still, in this case, we could also have a new small country created there. In addition, there was also at some point an attempted breakaway of the Republic of Rio Grande in the same style as Texas breaking away, except they weren't successful. They had a pretty cool flag using the color black, which is usually left out of flags, and even in a similar design to Texas's flag. If suddenly Rio Grande were to recover this attempted independence, then maybe we could consider the idea of also bringing back an independent Texas. I mean, we might as well even consider the potential union of these two new countries into a larger sovereign one, a Texan Rio Grande Republic, if you will, increasing the odds of success for both. And that would be all of our changes for Mexico, which finally brings us to Central America proper. The first thing that came to mind here was to annex Belize to Guatemala. Apparently, it's a reasonably big dispute in the region right now. Ghost Countries just made a video about it that is very interesting, but Belize definitely wouldn't want that. And I think the most obvious answer here is, in similar fashion to what we did in the Caribbean, to unite them. The United Provinces of Central America were already a country that existed in the past, between 1823 and 1841. I think a new union today would probably be tremendously beneficial to all of these people, and it could be done in a less intense way, if you will, with each country maintaining its sovereignty, but another EU-like model being created, with a common currency and free movement of people and goods. Hey, maybe Chiapas could even join them too. Panama wasn't a part of the regional union and has a separate heritage and history from it, so in this scenario I would keep it out too, and so this would be our redesigned Central and North America, with some countries losing territory, others gaining it, others having both, as well as new countries being created and at least two inter-country unions existing as well. What do you think? Are any of these changes things that you would like to see happen, and which do you disagree with? Let me know in the comments. Remember to check out my other videos if you want. Subscribe also if you are interested in catching future videos, and I will see you next time for more general knowledge. Today I have this Moomin cup. I think it's new. I think it's one of the, well, it's not new, it's been here, but I think I haven't shown it in a video yet. And it has two very in-love Moomins and then some other ones hanging around. It's like a spring, I would say like a spring scenario that they're in. I've also noticed that I have a stain on my sweater. I don't know if you can see it. Probably way too close. I think it's like olive oil or something, which is annoying because it doesn't seem to come off. Like I washed it 3 different times, so I think it's blocked by the microphone throughout most of the video. But if you noticed it, then that is why.